Hello and welcome to InFocus. I am G. Sampath. From July 1st, the Delhi government started enforcing a fuel ban on end-of-life vehicles or ELVs. Now, ELVs in Delhi are diesel vehicles that are more than 10 years old and petrol vehicles more than 15 years old. Now, this enforcement drive, wherein these vehicles will not get fuel at petrol pumps, was initiated following orders from the Commission for Air Quality Management or CAQM, which stipulated this particular order of no fuel for ELVs from July 1st. But now the Delhi government has written to the CAQM saying that this order should be suspended with immediate effect because of various reasons. It has cited public outcry, it has cited quote-unquote critical operational and infrastructural challenges. Now, while such an enforcement drive raising a public outcry or public discontent is understandable, it cannot be denied that the air quality in Delhi remains an emergency sort of situation for much of the year. So how was this decision to ban diesel vehicles over 10 years old and petrol vehicles over 15 years old from the roads of Delhi? How was this decision taken in the first place? What is the scientific basis for it? And in a poor country like India, where for many their vehicle has a close link with their livelihoods, not just delivery persons for various apps, but also other kinds of sectors and industries, vehicular mobility is very, very important. What happens to these people when they have to suddenly let go of their vehicles because of this particular ban, and where will they get the funds to suddenly buy a new vehicle every 10 or 15 years? Is this a realistic kind of a policy to be adopted at all in the first place? We discuss all these questions around this issue in this episode of InFocus. And joining us today is Anumita Roy Chowdhury, who is the Executive Director, Research and Advocacy at the Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi. Anumita, welcome to the pod.
Thank you.
So Anumita, to start with, I was just wondering, you're someone who has worked on clean air and sustainable mobility for a very long time. So can you just give us a quick background, overview of how this decision to ban vehicles, diesel vehicles more than 10 years, petrol vehicles more than 15 years, how did this come about, and this particular way of enforcing this ban, don't give them petrol or diesel overnight. How did this kind of decision come about? Is there a basis to it?
Yeah, it is very important to understand the chronology of how this whole decision making took place. So clearly, the genesis and the origin of this decision is this particular directive from the National Green Tribunal, NGT, in the year that 2014-15, around that time, when NGT had given this specific direction that 10-year-old diesel and 15-year-old petrol need to be banned in the region. Immediately after that, this was taken to the Supreme Court and it was challenged there. But then the Supreme Court also upheld this decision and said that this will have to be enforced and that the states should also put out a list of such vehicles and it will be deemed as a violation of the rule.
So this ban has been in effect for the last 10 years, that means?
So, absolutely. So it started around 2015 and then upheld by Supreme Court. Then in the year 2022, when Delhi government then suddenly, when they started to implement the measure, they deregistered all the overage vehicles.
So from 2015 to 2022, this wasn't implemented at all?
No.
It only on paper?
Right. So even though it was talked about, but never a concerted effort was made to implement it. Then in 2022, then they deregistered on paper all the overage vehicles. But again, that was challenged in the High Court. Then High Court said, because that was a time when Delhi government, while after deregistering the vehicles, they also started impounding the vehicles. So when that started, then some people, they went to the court and then the High Court said, okay, let them take their vehicle, but pay a penalty. And also give an undertaking that they should not be lying on the road. So that's what the Delhi government did. Immediately after that, they put out a guidelines and saying that that these vehicles will have to be privately parked, right? So basically what you're saying, okay, you keep your vehicle, but you're not allowed to drive them on the road. Subsequently, Delhi government also came up with some kind of a scrappage incentive. They said, okay, those who are going to voluntarily scrap their vehicle, they will also get some concession in their motor vehicle taxation when they buy a new vehicle to replace the old. And then finally, in 2025, when the CAQM, then they intervened because they wanted to ensure complete and full implementation of this measure. And therefore, this specific ruling was given, directive from the CAQM, that no fuel to the overage vehicles. And for that, they set up all these cameras in petrol pumps and saying that, the cameras will read the number plate, recognize an overage vehicle, and then they will not be allowed fuel. And that's where the story has exploded.
Right. No, you just said that, according to this order from the Supreme Court and subsequently in the High Court as well, owners of vehicles which are more than overage vehicles, basically, they can have them privately parked. But they can also sell them to somebody in other states, right?
Other states.
So
absolutely.
So how does this really make sense? If they are bad for the atmosphere in Delhi, they would be bad for the atmosphere in Karnataka, Maharashtra,
absolutely.
wherever.
They will still be within the airshed of some city.
Yeah.
Right? So clearly, therefore, we have to think through the solution more clearly. Right? And that's what really takes us to the question that what should we do then? Okay? And here we are actually trying to understand two different kind of questions. One, should we, to improve air quality, target the old vehicles or not? That's one, the scientific basis of targeting old vehicles. And the second one is the method of doing it. Okay, because somewhere the two are getting confused. So let me try and first answer the first one. That should we target? Now here, yes, it is not only in Delhi, but globally. Fleet renewal, that how you renew your older fleet quickly based on newer technology, cleaner fuels, and maybe even zero emission technology. That how can we accelerate that process so that old and aging fleet of vehicle that actually locks in an enormous amount of pollution. Now, that's something that the people don't really understand how, because you will often hear when this kind of measures are taken, they will come back and tell you, but my car meets the PUC norms, even if it's 15-year-old, right? Now, that's one demystification is needed. First of all, the emission standards these older vehicles meet, which we call Bharat Stage 1, 2, 3, okay? These were originally designed to emit a lot more than the Bharat Stage 6 that we have today. So if I just give you, so for instance, a Bharat Stage 3 car, diesel car, emits 11 times higher particulate matter than the current diesel car that you will buy under BS6. Okay? So these are inherently more polluting because that's the logic of why we improve emission standards, so that the newer vehicles can keep getting cleaner and cleaner. So clearly that's one. Second, with age and with high usage, the vehicles also deteriorate. Sometimes they're not properly maintained. They can also have inherent technical problems. And that's why they will also become high emitters on the road. So that's the reason why we want to see a continuous renewal of the fleet. That must happen, right? Now, that's the reason why we want it to happen. The question, now that's one reason why it should happen. Second is that the moment you call something an end of life, there's a difference between old vehicle and end of life vehicle. End of life vehicle is which is now completely unfit. You really cannot drive it productively anymore. It is a junk vehicle, right? Then what do you do with it? Then even for that, you need very clear policies, and we have that. Delhi government, national government, they have now a scrappage policy. Private sector is setting up scrappage centers now. The reason is you want to build circularity around that car so that all the material, the steel, aluminium, plastic, glass, you want to take it all out for more productive usage.
But isn't the scrappage sector like largely unregulated? It's informal sector.
As of now, yes. So mostly it is unregulated, but now we are moving towards regulated system. And that's the reason why even for Delhi, now the private sector is actually coming. They're setting up this very advanced scrappage center so that you can do scientific dismantling, material recovery, which is very critical, right? Without adverse environmental impact, which is sometimes very difficult to ensure in informal scrapping. So there are so many different dimensions to it. So therefore the question is that, okay, if we really have to do this, then if we really need to renew our fleet, then what is the best way to move forward? Is age ban as a standalone measure, is that the most suitable and appropriate way to do that or not? And that's where we have to understand that deeper.
Right. So, you gave a number of reasons why as a vehicle ages, it becomes more polluting, and there is also the other dimension of, different pollution norms which gets over a period of time more stringent and so on. But what about retrofitting in an older vehicle? I mean, if my car is a diesel car or petrol car is 10 years, 15 years old, is it not possible to retrofit certain technical devices to the car so that the emissions are taken care of? Is there technology for that kind of intervention available, or is it an option?
See, technically retrofitment is possible, even legally possible. But we have to understand retrofitment is not something that can happen off the shelf. It's not that I have an old car, I just go to the market, pick up a kit and come and retrofit it. Retrofitment itself requires, and already we have that, very detailed regulations are now in place, which it says that you have to get certification for retrofitment model by model. So it's not that I've got one retrofitment kit and I can just go and fit it in any old vintage. So if it is a specific make and model of a specific company, and if I'm a retrofitter, I will have to get my certification done for that specific make and model, which is not interchangeable. Then so technically it is possible. But secondly, you will also have to look into the cost effectiveness of this, and also the technical feasibility in many models, like if it's a very old vehicle, suppose 15-year-old, you first also have to look into the structural integrity of the rest of the vehicle, the chassis, all the structural aspects of a vehicle. And then, so there are so many different issues, and then safety requirements and so forth. So retrofitment is an option, but it has to be done case by case basis. It requires a very strong oversight for quality control, so you do not have safety episodes happening. So it has to be done with caution.
Right. Now, you sort of raised this question earlier in terms of weeding out obsolete vehicles and or polluting vehicles. Is age-based intervention the best one? Now, on this question, Anumita, I was just wondering, what if I have a 16-year-old petrol car, which is meeting extent pollution norms? It's perhaps polluting much less than many 12-year-old petrol cars. So my question is, instead of having an arbitrary number like 10 years for diesel, 15 years for petrol, can't we have like a more neutral or objective set of emission metrics to which you can tie this weeding out business?
So therefore what we are saying, that instead of having a standard standalone age cap across all vehicle segments, okay, we need to do this in a more targeted way. For instance, and this is quite consistent with what also Minister of Road Transport and Highways is also saying, that for the scrappage policy, for instance, let's first target the old heavy-duty vehicles. These are very overused vehicles, high-mileage vehicles. They deteriorate quite a bit. So, and the heavy-duty technology vehicles, they also contribute hugely to the pollution load compared to other segments, right? So you can be a lot more targeted as far as scrappage and identification of end of life is concerned.
So these heavy-duty vehicles would mean like what kind of?
Like trucks, old buses, interstate buses, long-distance trucks. So that's where you do have a case where you can have an age cap. But even that age cap will also require some incentive and disincentive, because you also have to make it for the people to really do this, because there is a cost involved. So we have to then come up with an incentive and disincentive policy to enable that. Now, but the other way of doing this, as you said, the metrics. Now, for that, what they are saying, you do need a much more improved emission monitoring and measurement systems to be in place. Now, here, therefore, what happens, so when you do not have any infrastructure in the country or city to do a proper emission testing, then how will you even try and identify that what is the worst polluter, what is the unfit vehicle? Now, that's why some of the older decisions that have come in this country also, where we have actually banned 15-year-old commercial vehicles, those were taken at a time when India did not have any infrastructure for proper inspection. And that happens in most developing countries. But now we are better equipped. So I'll draw an example. Today already, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, they have a notification where they are saying that all commercial vehicles will have to undergo annual tests for roadworthiness, road fitness, and emissions in automated vehicle testing centers that are being set up in different parts of the country. Delhi also has one in Juljuli, right? Now, those improved testing systems will identify the unfit and end-of-life vehicles. Now, that's the scientific way of doing it. So in that, therefore, then this answers your question, because then it is just not a blanket old vehicle, because we have seen from evidence from different parts of the world that it's just old vehicles, yes, they do emit more, but even some of the newer vehicles can also be the worst polluter, maybe for some inherent technical defect. So you need this kind of surveillance system to do that. Now the question is, for the commercial vehicles, they will go to the improved testing centers. But for the private vehicles, as of now, we have not started that process. What happens to cars and two-wheelers then? For that in Delhi, and I remember we were part of that conversation in 2018 when the Supreme Court had given direction to the Delhi government and to the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways that go beyond the pollution under control certificate program, because that is a very old archaic program that we do, the PUC certificate. That is just not a very effective way of screening vehicles. They said go beyond that.
What exactly does the PUC certificate do?
Pollution under control, the PUC test that you know that if you don't have your certificate, you'll be challaned.
Yes,
right?
That's the only thing most people seem
Absolutely.
to get.
So what does it do? You take your car, you just switch on your engine, and then they do the testing of your idle emission. Okay, and they look for, so if it's a petrol car, they will look for concentration of CO, carbon monoxide and hydrocarbon in your exhaust. And if it is a diesel vehicle, they will look for the density of the smoke, how black the smoke is. Now, this is not same as the emission standards. This is only to see whether your engine is burning the fuel completely, whether there is incomplete combustion or some other maintenance-related defect, which is causing it to emit more than it is designed to emit. That's all it does. But imagine now that when we are at Bharat Stage 6 level of technology and the PUC for diesel vehicle only looks for the density of the black smoke. But in the new technology of the diesel that we get today, you don't see any smoke in that. But that does not mean it's not polluting, because now it is emitting very tiny particles that you cannot see with your eyes. So what's the point in doing a smoke density test when there is no dense smoke to measure?
Right. And you would also get a PUC certificate clearance if, when we have a Bharat Stage 6 scenario, your car, which is Stage 4, would be measured in terms of its Stage 4 capabilities only, and if it passes it, it passes it.
Yeah, but then it is still an idle emission test, which is a very simple metrics. It is not the same as the kind of certification testing that happens for new vehicles. Right? So it is not a very good proxy to find out how bad your vehicle is in terms of pollution. For that, therefore, globally, and even now in Delhi, we have done the pilot test twice, okay, to demonstrate to do remote sensing measurements. This is a lot more advanced testing where you don't take your car for any physical test, but while you are driving on the road, there are machines by the roadside that will monitor and instantly read lot more parameters in your exhaust. Computer can record that immediately and issue your challan immediately. So globally
But
now...
how would that work on the road? Say in a traffic jam, there will be like 20
No, there
vehicles
are
standing
ways.
right
No,
next
so
to each.
what they do, they create a lane. So then the vehicles have to go nearly one by one. Okay, but they are moving. So that means there's a load. Like in PUC, there is no load on the vehicle because there's no speed, you're not accelerating. But there you are accelerating, decelerating, putting, so all that impacts the emission. Okay, all those will show up. And therefore, that is a much better way of recording. And you can do a much larger screening of the vehicles. Now, that's the way you should be able to identify who are the worst emitters, therefore. Now, technically, therefore, what is said, the logic behind this is that actually it's not, don't say generically that all old vehicles polluting. What they say that it is actually a very small percentage of vehicle on the road that contribute disproportionately higher to the pollution load. Like for instance, there's a study by the ICCT which showed that in 2000,
ICCT,
this International Council for Clean Transportation, and there they have shown that in India, so in 2011, when about 23% of the vehicles were pre-2003 old, but they were responsible for more than 50% of the load, right? Now, and not only that, in the Ministry of Road Transport Highways data on heavy-duty vehicles, they say that even just about 7 to 8% of the heavy-duty trucks can be responsible for more than 50% of the pollution load from that fleet, right? So that means identification of those worst polluters becomes very critical. So we need to do that, but we therefore have to improve our surveillance system. And today we should be able to do that because 1998, when Supreme Court said 15-year-old commercial vehicles should also be banned, the logic then was that you don't have anything else. There was no infrastructure in the country then, right? So, but now things have improved a lot more. And ministry itself has come up with this kind of regulations.
Right. So if I understand you correctly, I think I've got a very clear answer to my question. Why this 10-year, 15-year business in the first place? It is because we did not have the surveillance measurement infrastructure for actually getting which vehicle is polluting how much. So we went by this rough proxy of, okay, very old means polluting out. Yeah. That kind of logic. Right. Okay, now on this question of which vehicles are the ones which are contributing the most in terms of the pollution load, I was wondering, is there any data or science or research that you've come across in terms of how much of this pollution is coming from privately owned vehicles, cars and bikes, and how much of it is from commercial vehicles, there's buses and trucks and tempos and so on, because many people, especially ordinary citizens, might be wondering, are we being disproportionately targeted with these kinds of fuel bans when there should actually be an institutional focus on commercial and heavy duty vehicles, which might be, most of them are diesel, and they might therefore be, you might also get more results more quickly if you were to focus on them. But then at the same time, I imagine they would also be more difficult to tackle, because if you're going to change your entire fleet of public transport buses, then the government will have to spend money on that, right?
No, but you know what? To be fair, if you see the way the measures and the policy action has unfolded in Delhi, the most important target of action so far have been the buses, trucks, and commercial vehicles, right from the year 2000 onwards. Just imagine, the entire bus fleet has undergone transformation. First, you moved from diesel to CNG in Delhi. You're not allowed any diesel bus in Delhi. So from the CNG, and now they are moving to electric. And today, Delhi has got the highest number of electric buses. So the bus strategy is already in place. This is also the only city where a diesel truck, when they enter the city on a daily basis, they have to pay an environment compensation charge to enter Delhi, right? And 10-year-old diesel trucks are not allowed to come inside, right? Commercial vehicles locally, with the local permits, they are also out of diesel. They're moved to CNG. So the private car owners or vehicle owners cannot say that they are being disproportionately targeted. In fact, so far, nobody has touched them other than just, improving the technology levels of emission standards. So that the commercial, in fact, just look at the Delhi aggregator policy that has given this whole ambitious target to all the ride hailers and the aggregators and delivery companies to move to electrification. 100% electrification target is being given to them. So clearly that is already underway. Question emerges with the personal vehicles. Now that's the issue. Now today we are talking about a mobility crisis in this city. It is fascinating that even after Delhi improving its emission standards, going to CNG, doing electrification, even trying to get rid of old vehicles, even after all of that, if you look at the official data, vehicles are still the top contributor to air pollution. And the simple reason here is the sheer volume of traffic. And that's where the two-wheeler and cars come in. Now, even if per unit of car, it is emitting less than a truck, but the sheer number and volume in the road is actually swamping that effect, right? So that means the time has really come to address the vehicles, the personal vehicles. Now that also means not only improving the technology level, that you do.
So you don't think there is this argument that quite a bit of the air pollution load in Delhi is coming from the local industries in and around Delhi rather than vehicles?
So if you look at, now it is very interesting that the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, they every winter, they do a dynamic estimation by the hour where they show where the pollution is coming in Delhi. What is fascinating is, if you take the total concentration of pollution in Delhi, yes, a lot of it is coming from outside Delhi overall. But when you look at the local sources of Delhi, industry, waste, vehicles, then vehicles are 50% during winter months. So among the local sources of Delhi, vehicles are at the top now. So now if this and this is also happening because we have not invested enough in public transport, last mile connectivity, integration of bus and the metro, or the parking restraints, right? So this sheer dependence on personal vehicles is leading to this explosive number. Now, if we do not address it, now suppose they remain polluting, we do not see massive advancement in their technology level, or reduce their numbers by through a demand management measure, then we will not be able to address the problem. So that's why what we are saying that yes, do fleet renewal, connect that fleet renewal with incentives and disincentives, and there are many ways of doing it. How you incentivize fleet renewal, how you disincentivize. In some states like Maharashtra today, they have a concept of green tax. This is higher on older vehicles. Now use these methods more intelligently, okay, so that you can influence the consumer choice instead of a ban. So while for commercial vehicles, targeted heavy-duty vehicles, you can do ban with incentive, disincentives. For personal vehicles, try and use other methods of incentives or disincentives to influence their choice. But it is needed.
Right. So you would agree that this entire idea of denying fuel to personal vehicles which are 10 years, 15 years older is a bad idea. You can't really enforce a clean air in this manner. Do you think that we agree that it's not something?
It's not about clean air. Of course, this action is targeted at fleet renewal, as I said, that old vehicles to be replaced with new vehicles. But what I'm saying is that this standalone mandate of age cap across all vehicles.
It's not just the mandate.
This is not practical. This is not feasible because this is not even scalable, right? And these vehicles then will be in some other airshed. And also we need to do this in a way, and there's a lot of learning from around the world on how these things can be designed, how you can still do this. Because we still want to see people replacing their old vehicles. It is needed. No one should think that this is not needed. It is needed, but as I said, this abrupt, disruptive, across-the-board ban, this is not a workable model, and this is also not a scalable model. That's the whole argument here. So look at all these other options of doing this, but this is needed. People need to understand that every time I hear, please don't touch my car, we also have to get out of that syndrome. Okay, there's a lot of accountability and onus that are being placed on commercial vehicles already. On public transport, today we are banning three-wheelers in different cities of India, which is the mode of transport for the poor and the, just not the poor, but for most people, even for last mile connectivity. Nobody bats an eye, right?
No, but it's not just about don't touch my car. It's also like somebody who's a Swiggy or a Zomato driver who has a bike,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
might be 15 years old. I mean, how can we expect them to just
Absolutely, I agree with you.
do without
That's
that
the
bike? They
only-
can't take
yes.
public transport in any case.
Absolutely. That's the reason I'm saying that you therefore enable the transition instead of going for this kind of an abrupt ban.
So how would you enable a transition for somebody who's just bought a bike on loan and second-hand bike, let us say, used bike, and then they need to, the bike has crossed the or whatever, it fails the pollution metrics, and they have to keep doing this. So how can they do this without some kind of a subsidy or something from the government? Yeah.
Exactly. So in fact, if you recall that when this decision was taken in Delhi to move all the auto rickshaws from to CNG, so then Delhi government had to come up with a fiscal strategy that how do you give them low cost loan, etc., easy payment. So all of that you will have to work that out, and it is needed. In fact, if you look at the original EV policy of Delhi, that had actually said that the purchase of the electric vehicle will be cross-subsidized by higher motor vehicle taxation on internal combustion engine, but that was never enforced. Right. So we need to do that. Today, in fact, I mean, we have pushed for that. Today in Delhi, as I said, every day truck come, they pay environment compensation charge. If you want to buy a diesel car today in Delhi with 2000 cc engine higher, you'll have to pay 1% of the cost of the car as pollution charge. Every liter of diesel that you buy today in Delhi, you actually pay a 25 paise environment cess on that. All these polluter pay principles, which is a very good practice, have been put in place in Delhi. And not only that, the revenue from 3 streams have not been taken to the general exchequer. They have created dedicated fund out of it. So it's a great example where with this dedicated fund, and you have thousands of crore already from all the 3 sources, why not create a proper incentive package to replace the old vehicles and targeted old vehicles? So it's doable, and we should do it like that. So you have to come up with a policy. It's important to have a policy like this, that how do you do fleet renewal, but then focus more on the enablers for the policy. That is what is needed.
Enablers rather than coercive.
Subsidy, incentives.
Yeah, with all of these policies, in terms of fleet renewal and other aspects which you outlined, Anumita, Delhi still has the worst air in the country.
Absolutely.
Why do you think that is the case? Is it something which is beyond the control of the governance bodies of Delhi, or is it that the governance bodies of Delhi are not doing enough? Is that, how would you look at that?
Delhi is a fascinating example of what pollution battle is all about. If you look at what Delhi has already done to clean up the air, no other city has done all of them together, right? If I just give you some examples. In the transport sector, entire public transport and commercial transport already on CNG with electrification happening, emission standards improved, old vehicles moving out, trucks restriction. This is one city where in your legal industrial areas, they have moved out of coal, furnace oil, pet coke, and it is largely natural gas. All coal power plants in Delhi, Rajghat, Indraprastha.
The Okla one?
No, the coal power plants, they have all been shut. There is no coal power plant left in Delhi, okay? Now, these are not small measures. And with that, we have seen that how over a period of time over the last 10 years, Delhi's annual average levels of particulate matter is actually coming down. It has bent the pollution curve, right? But the challenge is, and that's what we really need to understand, that even after doing all of this, Delhi still requires another 60% reduction to be able to meet the clean air standards. Now here, therefore, what we need to really recognize, one, yes, there are still big gaps in action in Delhi. One, clearly in the transport sector, as I said, the mobility side. Okay, the technology has improved, but the mobility crisis is undercutting that gain. And it's bizarre today to see that you're increasing the electric bus numbers, which is damn good, okay? But numbers are going up, but they are running more empty kilometers because the bus ridership is coming down because buses are not attractive on congested roads, right? So that's one big area of action. Second big area of action still is with the waste management. Okay, there's still 30% of waste that is not properly collected, and therefore uncollected waste is then burned in the open. The legacy waste is still burning, so all that will require very aggressive measure. There are peripheral industry, okay, who are still using dirty fuels, and we need to do something about those, and also those in non-conforming areas, right? And then we have the dilemma of the poor people, the migrants in the city who cannot afford LPG, and they have to resort to solid fuels for their cooking, and that's an issue, that's a social issue that we have to address. Now that's Delhi's agenda, but the point still remains that while Delhi should focus and be a lot more aggressive about its action now, but it cannot still meet its clean air target if the rest of the region around it also do not clean up. So the action that you're talking about in Delhi needs to be scalable, not only in Delhi, but across the region going beyond to the Indo-Gangetic plain. You will see that during winter, when the entire Indo-Gangetic plain, if you look at the map, the satellite, it's under the blanket of smog. Okay, now when the entire Indo-Gangetic plain is under blanket of smog, Delhi cannot become a green island there. Right? So that's why now we really have to look at air quality action not as a local action, but it really has to be a regional action now.
Right. I mean, I really appreciate your excellent summing up of the anti-pollution agenda for Delhi, the magnitude of it, the challenges of it. So my last question to you, Anumita, before we wrap up. Now, you said in terms of counter measures for cracking down on pollution and air quality improvement, the big gap in Delhi remains the transportation sector, on which, especially the personal vehicle segment. So on this, very quickly, would 100% electric vehicles, everybody goes and sells all their ICE vehicles and switches to electric vehicles overnight, let us say, would that solve the problem? Will there be no emission issues once everybody switches to EVs? Do EVs have zero polluting kind of emission norms?
At least what will happen, so there are two ways of looking at it. One, what you really require is zero emission mass commuting, okay? So you need your electric buses, you need your electric paratransit integrated with the metro. So your mass commuting will have to become completely zero emission. Yes, even personal vehicles should also be electric, but we still need to control numbers.
Why? Why is that?
Because congestion will not allow public transport to be efficient, and you will not, so it's not just about zero emission vehicle, you also require zero emission streets in terms of where people can walk and cycle, right? Keep in mind that if you really want public transport to be successful, you want walkable streets, because each and every public transport trip begins and ends with a walk trip. And if you cannot walk to a metro station, if you cannot walk to a bus station, if it is not accessible to you, you will not use public transport. So it is not just about the technology, you also have to do the mobility planning for the city. So yes, we need electrification to have zero tailpipe emissions, but it is still not enough. You still need to do mobility management, and that's where the whole focus needs to be.
Right, zero emission mass commuting. I think that's a very good note to conclude this conversation. It was really informative and insightful. Thank you so much, Anumita, for joining us.
Thank you, Sampath.